A new law bringing jobs for veterans on the border.
Gives good jobs for our veterans and provides a fast tracking to fill these really important positions that are important for our security and also for economic opportunities and trade with Mexico.
Veterans Day remembered with Purple Heart recipients.
More than what happened to me. You think about the friends that you lost.
This is Arizona Week. Hello and welcome to Arizona Week. I'm Christopher Conover in for Lorraine Rivera. This week, the nation paused to honor men and women in uniform. Before we get to our veterans' stories, we sat down with Congresswoman Martha McSally. She's a veteran and the author of a new law aimed at getting vets jobs on the border. You just had a law signed into law by the president dealing with veterans, helping them get jobs on the border. That's a good thing for our area, especially because we have bases with people separating and the border right here.
Absolutely. It's a win-win. We've been down and visited the different ports of entry at Nogales and Douglas and heard that they were undermanned and asked them, what's the issue? And they said, it takes really long to find people and get them through the background checks and the vetting. And then I go visit the Pima County One Stop for veterans and the challenges they're having with veterans finding good jobs. And you look at them like, okay, these are two things that we could easily just put together and have a good initiative that is a win-win, gives good jobs for our veterans, and provides a fast tracking to fill these really important positions that are important for our security and also for economic opportunities and trade with Mexico. So that's the mindset I have in Washington, D.C. Been there 10 months. Is like, okay, we see a problem, we see a solution, let's figure out how to get it done. Sponsored it, got it through the House unanimously, worked with our senators, got it through the Senate, and it's my first bill to get signed into law. There's just a little over 50 substantive pieces of legislation signed so far this year, and as a freshman member of Congress, it's an absolute honor to have one of them, and it's going to solve a problem in our community.
And the jobs that will be available to these veterans are Border Patrol jobs, port of entry, customs jobs, correct?
Yeah, the focus was the blue suiters at the ports of entry, the Customs and Border Protection officers of this bill, and because those are the ones that have right now 800 positions that are unfilled. They had increased authorizations, but they just haven't been able to fill these positions. And so we're trying to fast track that and make sure that eligible veterans are getting these good jobs and they're making them actively recruit, working closely with the Pentagon and at local bases to get them into those jobs. Sometimes it's taking 6 months to a year to hire somebody, but this should allow us to be able to fill these positions quickly.
Let's talk about another bill that you worked a lot on, the National Defense Authorization Act, what everybody calls the NDAA. This is the bill that tells the Pentagon basically how to spend its money. A couple of very big things for Arizona, especially southern Arizona. The A-10 and the EC-130 are preserved for at least another year.
Absolutely. This is a big win, and we've been working on this since I got to Congress. The president delivered his budget to us, and it had the A-10 being mothballed and 50% of the EC-130s going into the boneyard, and they're only at Davis-Monthan Air Force Base. And so led the effort in the House to make sure that we kept the A-10 and the EC-130 flying. Got an amendment passed in language in the markup of the bill for the A-10 to protect any backdoor things from happening like we saw last year. And then I offered an amendment on the floor for the EC-130 to protect it in a similar manner. We've had to go through some challenges and hurdles along the way, but we're finally at the finish line, and the A-10 and the EC-130 are protected to continue to fly. These are unique missions. They're very important missions to our national defense, and they're critical for Davis-Monthan and our community.
Let's talk first about the EC-130. A lot of people may not realize that that plane even exists. It looks just like your basic C-130 cargo plane unless you know what you're looking at. What's its mission?
So it's only stationed at Davis-Monthan Air Force Base, and it's an electronic jamming platform. It's the only one of its kind in the Air Force inventory, and we have 2 squadrons here. It's currently deployed to 2 locations, the fight against ISIS in Afghanistan, and it's absolutely critical to keeping our troops alive. It's been very adaptive, even in the operations in Iraq and Afghanistan. It can do a lot of things. A lot of it's highly classified, but it's related to electronic surveillance and electronic jamming. And the Air Force, again, wanted to cut the capability in half before we actually have a replacement. There's no suitable replacement right now, and we've just been pushing on them that, hey, until we have a replacement, you can't be taking away these critical capabilities.
Also hitting the NDAA in your district, there was money for Fort Huachuca and money for Raytheon also.
Yeah. absolutely, Raytheon is top employer in our district, critical part of our defense capabilities. I think I'm one of the few members of Congress who shot their missiles and visited their facility out there. But there's some of their lines, like the Tomahawk line as an example. If you go below a certain number, then you can't keep the line open. And so we needed to make sure, especially when we are in situations where we might need to go after targets on very short notice. These are critical capabilities for our combatant commanders on short notice if we can't deploy other forces into the region. And so we've got to make sure we have those capabilities and we don't shut down the assembly line. So really worked really hard to make sure the Tomahawk, the JSOW, and some other of the missiles there are protected. And that's also helping our economy here in southern Arizona.
Switching gears a little bit away from veterans for a moment, the highway bills are moving through. Arizona delegation, yourself included, got some things put in there for southern Arizona, the Sonoran Corridor, and also some more I-11 study, which of course impacts the entire state.
So we had 4 main objectives in the highway bill that were really critical for southern Arizona because we have the opportunity to become a trade hub for trade with Mexico, logistical support, dual manufacturing, but we can't do without the infrastructure. And California and Texas in the past have sort of beat us out, but we've got to make that trade come to us. So we pushed really hard to make sure that the Sonoran Corridor was listed in there as what we call a high priority corridor. Also I-11, the future capability that will allow us to come up through Arizona, to Nevada, as a high priority corridor. But in addition, I-19 wasn't even considered part of the freight network in the past bills, and we needed to make sure that that was going to be eligible for any federal funding, so we got that included. And then the last piece was the little 2-lane road that connects the Nogales port of entry to I-19. We can have a great new port and we can have all the great interstates, but if we go on a 2-lane bottlenecked road and we can't expand that road, then we're still going to have a problem. So we have language in there that we fought for that allows this state road to be eligible for future federal funding. And so those are 4 big wins for us in the highway bill.
In World War II, nearly 1/3 of the soldiers who were wounded died from their injuries. That number is now down to less than 10%. Better body armor and better, faster care make the difference. We now introduce you to Purple Heart recipients, soldiers wounded in battle. My colleague Nancy Montoya sat down with her 90-year-old father, Edward Montoya, before he died to talk about his experiences in World War II. Edward Montoya was born in the eastern Arizona mining town of Clifton in 1921. Growing up, he struggled with learning English.
We were segregated school. We were nothing but Chicanos. Didn't know how to speak English. Because the teacher used to say, speak English in the school grounds. But then I would go home and my parents used to say, don't talk to that language. Talk to us in Spanish and Mexicano. So we were between 2 worlds there. We didn't have who to practice our English with. All we knew is, here we come Lupi-Lu, here we come Lupi-La. I put my right foot in, I take my right foot out. We didn't even know what it was. My sister that reared me and my mother insisted, no, you go and finish high school. Education is very important.
Once he finished high school, he went to work at Phelps Dodge, the copper mine that was the largest employer in southern Arizona.
And they always paid $2 or $3 a day more than us Chicanos at work. Well, we accepted it because the gringo was always right. And we were very humble. But then me, I've always been not a radical. I'm not a radical by no means. As a matter of fact, I hate to use the word fight. I'm not fighting. Because when you fight, you're destroying. I want to build. When a Chicano would go against a gringo, oh, yes. Hijo, no tiene miedo, he's not afraid. No, it's not that we were afraid or not, we were ignorant. We didn't know what it was to be an American.
When World War II broke out, Montoya answered the call to arms as an American.
I was drafted into the Army of the United States of America, which I volunteered. Because I could have dodged them, because I had another department coming and I didn't want it. I wanted to go and see what it was all about.
Montoya was severely wounded in Okinawa. The 82-day battle was the largest amphibious assault of the Pacific Islands during World War II. There were 50,000 Allied casualties.
And up to this time, I'm not sorry. Because when I went in, I was a Chicano. After 2 years of my service, in the front line, not there, in the front lines, I became a full-blooded American, and you better believe it. I'm 100% American.
That experience would forever change him.
When I went in, I went like a little tiny rabbit. When I came out like a lion, chinga. And you better believe it. Not to hurt anybody, but to try to adjust our lives to the new world.
That new world, says Montoya, meant that you don't ask a man to shed his blood for this country, then expect him to come home and play by the old rules.
When I came out of service, there was going to be an opening for a foreman, and I went to the superintendent and asked him for a promotion. And he looked at me like, what nerve do you have to come in here and ask you for a promotion? He said, we have different promotions for you Mexicans. After I had gone and served, that man doesn't know how close he came for me to pull him out and just slap the hell out of him. But I held myself. I says, you son of a bitch, you owe me one. So I went out and I fought hard to organize the Mexican Union, and we did.
Our next Purple Heart recipient is Mike Dyer. He's a Vietnam vet and coached generations of basketball players at Mountain View High School near Tucson.
You know what? I'm one of the crazy ones. I loved it. I really, in those days, thought I was a stud. And of course, I found out maybe I wasn't, but boot camp was tough. They worked as hard. It really changed me from a boy to a man. When we got there, when they put that hatch down, the smell, the heat, you know, and then you walked out on the tarmac, it was just a weird, all of your senses were alerted that something was wrong. About halfway into my tour, because I shot real well, they sent me to the 9th Infantry Division sniper school. And so they sent me out by myself at night, dropped me off, and took care of the harassers. When we were in Vietnam, when we'd go out on night ambushes every night. And so you never slept more than an hour at night. We rode on armored personnel carriers. We called them tracks, APCs. And on the way home, back to Ben Phuc, that was our base camp. After 6 months, we built it and ran over a mine. And so it was me and the driver. It was on the track. He came to get me. And I could remember flying through the air. It was dark, you know, or just before daylight, so it was really dark. I can remember flying through the air, and I was wondering, I can remember, am I dead? When they were done with me with the paperwork, they told me, okay, now you guys need to take off your uniforms because you're going to be going through 3 airports, SeaTac, San Francisco, and Phoenix, where there are a lot of protesters. And I said, what? I am proud of who I am and what I did and what we did in Vietnam. And I wore my uniform, and yeah, you know, it was unbelievable the way we were treated. And, you know, all the war protests and all that, and maybe baby killer and all that. And I honestly believe that we were going to be treated like our fathers and our uncles from World War II. And yeah, it's hurt forever. It's hard to get that out of your mind when you think you've done something. You know, it's hard to really put it aside and move on. We have obviously moved on, but it's there in my brain that I cannot completely forget that. I didn't tell anybody that I was in Vietnam for probably 20 years, probably 20. Nobody knew. and I taught with all the people. And
Why?
because of the way I was treated.
He's bigger than you, Ricky. Keep your knees bent. Keep your knees bent. Oh, what a nice pass.
I'm fortunate because I'm a high school teacher, and I get to talk to young men and women every day. Before 9/11, I thought this generation was terrible. But our young men and women that responded to that, the best.
Now we introduce you to Mary Herrera. Her arm was amputated in a blast in Afghanistan. It was reattached at a field hospital. This Purple Heart recipient now works at the VA hospital in Tucson.
9/11 had happened, and I was raised pretty patriotic, you could say, and I was pretty pissed. I figured, I may not know the people that were injured during the Twin Towers, but nobody comes into my house and messes with my brothers and sisters and expects me not to pick a fight. We couldn't tell our families where we were going because the public still didn't have news that there were troops standing by in Kuwait, so I got to participate in that. Once we landed in Kuwait, as we're leaving the plane, the scud alerts went off, which means you have to don all your equipment for biological warfare. So that was pretty scary. That was the very first experience we all had putting our boots in Kuwait soil, was those scud missiles sounding and having to don your mask, and the flight attendants were crying and screaming, and then they put us on buses to take us to where we were staying, and the buses that had curtains because nobody knew there was American troops there yet. And we were doing a mission with some infantry kids, and they were hit with an IED. And the carnage, the trauma, the body parts that I witnessed, I was a gunner, that was my position. And that happened about 2 weeks before I was injured. And we had seen a lot of injuries before that, but for some reason, after that, I just felt some incredible fear that I've never felt before. So it was just a routine mission that morning. We went to Fallujah to drop off these prisoners. We got back in our vehicles, we got ready to drive out the gates, and we were driving out the gates, and it's funny how you remember everything so vividly. And sure enough, when I looked up, I saw the tracer fire. So I started firing out of my weapon. I was manning a saw at that time. And so I started firing, and immediately, right after I was pulling on the trigger, I felt like a flick on my upper right arm, just a little flick. It didn't keep me from firing, so I was still firing. I figured I was hit by a rock or something. So I continued to fire, and then as I'm firing with my saw, I'm holding it with my left and firing with my right. My right arm just fell to my left. I thought my arm had been blown off since I felt nothing. So I thought that I didn't have an arm there. Because from where we were at to get to Ramadi, it was still about a 35 minute drive. So we just drove on through to Ramadi, and as I came down from the turret, there's this firefight still going on. So, I have this lieutenant trying to hold pressure to my arm, trying to fire his rifle, and it was pretty chaotic. But at that point, I never looked at my injuries because I didn't want to panic. So I was calm, I didn't want to look at my injuries, and I was laying back there in the back seat of the Humvee, and I was looking up through the turret at the sky, and I didn't have any pain, but I felt this calm come through me. I had signed myself off. I spoke to God. I told him I was ready, and excuse me. So I made my peace, and I was ready. This gunshot that hit me up here, it was a pretty quick in and out gunshot, and it just snapped the bone in half, and it ripped through the main artery. So that wasn't as bad. But this one here, what this did is, when it came in, it blew everything out. The only thing attaching my hands to my arm was skin. I got my Purple Heart at Brooke Army Medical Center in San Antonio right after a surgery. I did get a ceremony. I was in hospital gear with slippers, and that's how I got presented my Purple Heart. I think it's one of the most prestigious medals in the military as a whole. I mean, to have the opportunity, the privilege and honor to say that you've added red to our red, white, and blue it's an amazing feeling.
Would you do it all, knowing what you know now, would you have done it all over again?
In a heartbeat.
Even knowing the extent of your injuries?
Even knowing that I might not come back, I'd do it again in a heartbeat.
Why is that?
Because I love my country.
In our final segment, Nancy Montoya reintroduces you to someone you may already know, Dr. Richard Carmona. He ran for U.S. Senate a few years ago. He was the 17th Surgeon General of the United States and also received 2 Purple Hearts during his service in the Army Special Forces in Vietnam. It's a time that's difficult to talk about.
Well, I'll give you a general. I mean, I don't like to reflect on those too much.
Why?
More than what happened to me. You think about the friends that you lost. I was lucky. I got into a number of bad situations, and on a couple of times I was injured, but I came home.
Yeah. What were your injuries?
I had, all of them, blast injuries to my leg, fragments and explosions, bad knee injury with a rocket hitting a boulder and then me falling off with the fragments, a gunshot wound to the head, fragments in my back.
For the Vietnam vets, when they came back, there wasn't any celebration. Do you remember when you came back?
Yeah,
what were those days like?
It was a lot of protests. I think the society had not matured enough to separate the soldier from the policy. And so we were all cast as bad guys, and there was all kinds of negative things said about us. Yet we were young kids. We did what our nation asked us to do, go and fight this war. None of us were old enough or mature enough to understand policy. We took on face value what our government said to do, and we went and did the job of the nation that they assigned us. And, 58,000 of my buddies, so to speak, didn't come home, and 250,000 of us were wounded. And so a lot of us, I really talk about these things. And, but when I do, in that small circle of friends, my Special Forces buddies, most of the time, it's the fond memories of those guys who didn't come back.
Is there a message that you would have liked to have conveyed back then that today you can convey about the men who came back, the men and women actually who came back?
Well, I think that the message I would convey is where society is today, and unfortunately it was 40 years ago or so that our nation had not evolved to the point where we could honor the brave young men and women who served their country in a selfless way and do whatever our government asked them to do. And if I was smart enough back then and mature enough, I would have said, separate the policy from these young men and women who have done what the nation asked them to do. Okay? And I think we see that today, that even though people may be against the war or for the war or somewhere in between, they understand that every one of these young men and women are simply a tool of American policy. And we honor their service because we, the people, asked them to serve. So as a middle-aged guy now, I travel a lot and I sit on a plane, and when I hear a stewardess ask everybody to stay seated because we have veterans from Iraq and Afghanistan coming on or getting off, it does bring tears to my eyes, because that really is the homage that we owe to these young men and women. We didn't experience that, but I'm profoundly grateful that our nation has evolved to a point where they understand this now.
One of the things that I think we tend to forget about is that for every soldier who comes back and has PTSD or whatever the continuum is, there's a family that is suffering, that is paying the price right alongside of them. What is the message out there to the community about those families?
Let me say something about family, because it's real important. You know, I still work a lot with the government, with the Department of Defense. I sit on boards and I deal with these issues. The family, when the warrior goes to war, the family's at war too. Okay, because that wife or husband and children are living the battles vicariously every day, every single day. I first learned that when I came home from my tour in Vietnam, and my little brother said to me, "Richie, I watch the news every night to see if I saw you." And I thought about that. But when you look, the families at home, whether they're poor, whether they're rich, they're worried about you every day. And so the stress of battle is on them too, but the battle is different. The battle is worrying about your survival and your health and your well-being for that mom or dad or child or grandpa or uncle, whoever that family is. So they all suffer as well. And we see mental health problems in the families, even though they're not the ones at war, but you know what? They are vicariously, because every day they're going through in their mind all of the challenges of what if he or she doesn't come home? What if they come home injured or wounded? Will daddy or mommy be the same? It's really a big issue. And we are only understanding and seeing the tip of the iceberg right now. Right now we have hundreds of thousands of young men and women with traumatic brain injury, mental health problems, and our nation has now inherited a huge disease and economic burden that will be with us for maybe a half a century. Because these 20-year-olds who are coming home from battle, who will need our support, they're going to need it for decades to come. Their life expectancy is still going to be 70 or 80 or 90 years old. And so what is the infrastructure that we have to ensure that they will always get the best care for whatever their needs are? That is the obligation that we have incurred as a nation.
And that's our show honoring veterans. I'm Christopher Conover. Thanks for tuning in.